How often are you given the chance to drive one of your dream cars?
If you've never driven an Alfa Romeo SZ, you don't know what you're missing.
Alfa Romeo and Zagato have worked together to produce some of the most iconic cars of the last century.
Alfa Romeos are special. It's all about the driving experience.
I was at the Classic Car Show at the NEC in November. I've been walking around the floor of the exhibition all day, and I was in the press office, and Jon Bentley from the Gadget Show came in. And I've seen him on the show wearing an Il Mostro Alfa SZ t-shirt. So I just asked him whether he owned the car or whether he was just a fan. And he said he was a fan but had never driven one. And I gave him a card and said, well, if he ever wanted to drive one, just to get in touch. Obviously I knew that Adrian from Alfa Aid had one. We're both in the Thames Valley section. So I thought, if he's interested, we'll sort something out. And then I didn't hear anything from him for a couple of months. I was actually in Hong Kong just before midnight and the phone rang. And it was Jon to say that he'd find an excuse to drive an SZ and that they were going to do an episode of the Gadget Show on podcasting equipment. And the subject of the podcast was going to be the Alfa SZ.
And we were doing a Gadget Show test on bits of equipment that could make your podcast sound more professional, but without involving you in too much effort or expense. And also here to drive an Alfa SZ, which is something I'd really wanted to do for quite a while. I'm in the curious position. I used to do a lot of work with cars in a former life, and I've reached a strange position where I can pick up a classic car magazine and I can remember driving most of the cars in it when they were new. But the Alfa SZ has always been a bit of a hole in that, because I very much remember it coming out. I remember being very impressed by its rather brutalist styling, but never actually got around to driving one for one reason or another. And Adrian's very kindly stepped in and offered his car, largely at the suggestion of Guy from the club whom I met at the Classic Car Show, who said, why don't you have a go in an SZ, because you're always wearing a t-shirt with one on.
We had 8 SZs and an RZ on site. We had 2 SZs and an RZ in the showroom. We had 2 more SZs outside the showroom. We had 3 cars currently being worked on in the workshop, and then my car out front.
Obviously, being television, they wanted all of the cars in different places. So we had to shuffle the cars around in the showroom to set up the round table for later on. While we were doing that, they did some close-up shots of the products that they were reviewing.
We've got quite a sophisticated microphone which actually potentially can do sort of virtual reality type sound. So if you're wearing a virtual reality headset and you're doing a 360 video, it'll orientate the sounds around with you. We're not using it to do that today. It's mainly much more, I'll be trying its ambisonic microphones out to do binaural stereo and see how good it is at that. Normally, getting a roundtable discussion recorded in high quality requires a whole load of individual microphones and cables, but this Zoom has an array of microphones on top that should give all-round high-quality coverage with much less effort.
And then we moved into the workshop and they did some sound effects using one of the cars in the workshop, doors closing, engines revving, that kind of thing.
I've got a small microphone which transmits wirelessly to an app, which supposedly is very high quality, but all at the same time be very small and easy to use, and will allow you to immediately use that sound on the internet through your phone. And I'll be interested to see how well that performs. That's called the Mic Me. And we're also trying out some relatively easy editing software. I'm not quite sure, it might be too easy, and you might be better off, in some ways, you might be better off with just a more conventional PC or a Mac-based software for audio editing. That's a little bit of the stuff we're trying. At the time it came out, it's the styling. Obviously, that spoke to me most of all. It was such an amazingly controversial statement, and it is almost like a brutalist car, like a bit of concrete architecture, but in a car, which is perhaps not a very good analogy, but it does have that sort of wonderful love it or hate it. It's not just a bland bit of the background, and it was very important when it came out for being that way. I know in some ways now we're probably more used to seeing cars and slightly more. I think car styling has become more more varied since then, but nevertheless, it was such a statement. I always had a definite desire to experience one closer at hand, and here there are so many. I mean, it must be a very significant proportion of the total production here, which was, I think, just over 1,000, wasn't it?
When the SZ came out at the end of the 80s, when I first saw it, I thought, what an amazing car, because it was just so controversial with its design and its styling. They were really cutting edge at the time in a lot of ways and very old school in many other ways. They took the best of the best from the 75, so it was basically, it was an IMSA type car, so the suspension was all set up, everything was right for handling, and that's what the SZ was all about. They then had to come up with a very special body, which the way it did it, it creates lots of downforce, it's got low drag, which just, again, it's all about the handling. And whenever you've driven one, as soon as you get involved in it, then you just can't help it. You love it because it just does handle. If you're not into driving, you won't enjoy an SZ. If you're into driving, you can't help but enjoy an SZ.
You know, they're all left-hand drive. We know they're all red, and except for the occasional pickup. And I think he just fell in love with it. To drive them is amazing, really cool. And I think that's it. Simple as that. They're amazing to drive. And they look completely mad, and people, it's Marmite, people love or hate it, don't they?
So we covered 2 of the microphones at Alfa Aid, and the third one they really wanted to test in the environment of the car. So we headed down to the Longcross Studios test track, which allowed us to do the in-car shots, but also gave us a chance to give Jon his opportunity to drive the SZ.
Have you driven one before?
No, I haven't. Definitely not driven one.
What are you hoping for from the driving experience?
It's very difficult. With old cars, you mustn't hope for too much, I think, because they're all individuals by the time they get older. We tend to forget how much better, in many ways, albeit often some ways insulated, new cars are. So, I mean, it's been an interesting. I keep an open mind. I don't hope for too much, but at the same time, I should be disappointed if there aren't some desirable and tangible and thrilling aspects of it.
When it came to Jon actually driving the SZ, I was slightly apprehensive, in fact more than slightly apprehensive, because I didn't know whether he'd like it or not.
The Longcross test tracks used a lot by magazines and film companies to film in a road setting, but in the safe environment of a test track. But it's also used by McLaren to do shakedown tests of their customer cars and tests of pre-production cars. So the one piece of safety advice we were given was to keep out of their way if we saw them in the rearview mirrors.
Having talked to him and stuff, I'd realised how much of a petrol head he was and how knowledgeable he was. And I offered to go out with Jon in the car just so that I could answer any questions or anything, so that he could basically get the maximum out of the drive, the opportunity. It wasn't long, it was like a quarter of a lap before Jon was on the limit in the car with the back just twitching out. He knew what he was doing, no question. And there was a McLaren in the distance, which we were gaining on anyway. So we had to actually do another lap so that we could nail this McLaren.
The TV crew were really accommodating. We wanted to obviously have an article in the magazine. So I wanted some shots of the TV crew shooting the SZ shot from a third vehicle. And they were happy to do that. So despite the fact it was a freezing cold day, we actually followed them round in my 939 Spider with the roof down, with Jonathan Griffin taking some shots from the passenger seat, which you can see in the article in the magazine.
I was surprised how fast we had to go around the Longcross test track to keep up with the SZ. And with the hood down, the buffeting from the wind was quite extraordinary, and the surface is not the best. So I hope those photographs came out okay.
No, it's all good. It looked absolutely great, the car did. And brilliant, Jon, nice work.
Oh, right. Are you all right getting in with Jon?
Mm-hmm. Jon had never driven an SZ before, and he wasn't sure whether he would like it. But he definitely did. In fact, so much so that 4 times the producer had to say, "We are filming a gadget show, not a car show."
Do Alfas hold a special place in your heart?
I don't. They can't not hold a place in the heart of anyone's interested in cars, but at the same time, I find it very difficult to have favourite cars. I always have, and I always think it's one sort of dream approach to cars is almost to have a huge collection available of everything, so that you can have a drive in an Alfa if you want that, or a Ferrari if you want that, or a 1962 Hillman Minx or something. If you're looking and saying, well, what were they like? And it's there, all ready and maintained in some ideal world, ready for you to go out and experience it.
We had a great day filming with Jon Bentley and the Gadget Show, and the opportunity to get the SZ in front of thousands of people who maybe would never even know what one was brilliant.
All in all, I think it was a fantastic experience. It was great exposure for Alfa Romeo as a brand. It was great for the club, and it was nice to be able to give Jon the experience that he'd never had, having lusted after the car since the 90s.